single casualty.
They established new settlements on undeveloped land by erecting towers and stockades in a single day. In 1938, they put up 37. The British armed and trained 20,000 Jews as the Jewish settlement police to protect the Jewish settlements. Their best-known British advisor was Ord Wingate. He trained special night squads designed to preempt Arab attacks. British reinforcements were needed urgently. Because of the situation in Europe, they were not available until autumn 1938. By then, 20,000 British troops were in Palestine.
We got to this stage when the whole fabric of government seemed to be collapsing. And whilst the army might restore order, they could never restore peace.
We had no possibility of telling them that Jewish immigration would cease or that the purchase of land would stop. So we had nothing really constructive to put forward. We were trying to deal with violence without being able to deal with the causes of it.
British troops tackled the Arabs with a will. Once reinforcements arrived, they quickly regained the initiative. The efforts of an exiled Arab leadership to direct the rebellion from Damascus were futile. The British were too determined. As the rebellion collapsed, Arab rivalries emerged. The British exploited the divisions. Informants enabled the RAF to bomb a meeting of rebel leaders in September. By May 1939, the rebellion was over.
This was a reconquest of Palestine by the British. In the process, they smashed the Palestinian political organization. They dispersed, exiled, or imprisoned the top leadership of the Palestinians. They broke the backbone of the military organization. They initiated a systematic and thorough policy of disarmament, of the disarming of the Palestinian population, which extended well beyond the end of the rebellion, so that they were suspended in a kind of political limbo for the next decade after the end of the rebellion.
The Arab rebellion made the British question the mandate and the Jews defend the national home. What the Arabs had failed to wrest from the British by force, they were now to get for other reasons. Berlin, 1939. Hitler returns after his annexation of Czechoslovakia, belligerent and expansionist. Appeasement had failed. Europe moved towards war. The British began to consider Palestine in the light of war. Britain's roots to the empire must be assured. Britain's interests in the Middle East maintained. The Arab states placated. British policy in Palestine was to be determined by considerations outside Palestine.
I think that our policy was perhaps a little bit cynical. It had a touch of cynicism in it. We knew that if it came to war, the Jews would be on our side, whatever happened. They had no choice. The great question was, would the Arabs be on our side? They had been our allies before. They were still our allies. But if we supported a situation in Palestine for the building up of the Jewish national home beyond a certain point, then the Arabs would be pushed into the war against us.
The Mufti, the religious and political leader of the Palestinian Arabs, seen here in Jerusalem, was now in exile, as were many of the rebellion's leaders. The Arabs of Palestine were to remain without effective leadership. The Mufti looked to the Axis powers for support. During the war, he was to court Hitler, a policy that finally was to discredit him. With war approaching, British troops in Palestine would be needed elsewhere.
We had 20,000 of our troops in Palestine, keeping the rebellion suppressed, and if it came to war, we would have to withdraw them. So we wanted peace, no Arab rebellion in Palestine. A second reason was that our communications with India and with the Far East in war depended on our air Force being able to fly through the Near East and the Middle East and so on. And the whole of the Middle East was going to be a matter of an area of strategic importance in the war, and we wanted the Arabs on our side.
So in February 1939, MacDonald called a conference in London.
Part of the purpose of the conference was to sound out and see whether we might get them to agree. But I had already determined, and the Cabinet had agreed, that if, as we expected, the conference failed, then the policy which we had already more or less decided upon before the conference opened should be put into operation firmly.
As expected, the conference failed. The British unveiled a policy to appease the Arabs in a white paper in May 1939. Jewish immigration was to be severely restricted and after 5 years be dependent on Arab consent. Land sales to Jews to be severely curtailed. It concluded,
His Majesty's government now declare unequivocally that it is not part of their policy that Palestine should become a Jewish state.
Ben-Gurion and Weizmann returned to Palestine with little choice. They would fight the war as if there were no white paper, and the white paper as if there were no war.